My daughter laughed when I gifted her old jewelry. She didn't know it was worth $500,000. I watched her auction it off for $40. Then I smiled and rewrote my will. "Mom, is this fake?" Emily sneered, her eyes narrowing as she held the small velvet box like it might stain her skin. "God, did you dig this out of a dumpster? What is this? Some antique trash from your glory days as a maid?" Her voice sliced through the room. Laughter followed, nervous, unsure, but it came. Her husband snorted. Her teenage son shook his head, trying to hide a smirk behind his soda can. I stood there, hand still half extended, the box gaping open in her palm. The necklace sat there, limp and lifeless under the lights. A part of me, the oldest part, cracked, but I didn't let it show. It was Emily's 35th birthday. The house was full. Friends, in-laws, co-workers, even her Pilates instructor made the guest list. But me, I was just her mother, the quiet one in the corner, who brought a strange, musty-smelling box instead of a designer handbag. "I mean," she went on, tapping the chain with her manicured nail, "it's kind of sweet in a tragic vintage way. Maybe I can use it as a Halloween prop." More laughter. "Huh?" I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I smiled the way I've learned to over the years. The kind of smile that holds your insides together. She passed the box around the table like a joke. One woman gasped, "You should have it appraised." "Who knows? Maybe it belonged to a pirate." Another said, "No offense, but it smells like mothballs." Someone added, "Does your mom always give you heirlooms?" Heirloom. If only they knew that necklace had been with me for 53 years. It had sat untouched in a velvet pouch at the back of my dresser drawer behind a stack of neatly folded linen handkerchiefs. I hadn't opened that pouch since 1986, but I remembered its weight. I remembered the day I received it, the day I thought I'd finally been seen, finally mattered before he left. I hadn't planned to gift it that day, but something told me, maybe foolish sentiment, that she was ready, that Emily, now a mother herself, might understand the meaning of something quietly passed down. Instead, she saw rust. "You could have at least polished it," she sneered, tossing the box onto the table with a careless flick. Still, I said nothing. Her husband poured her another glass of wine. I sat at the far end, picking at my salad, invisible as always. After cake, she pulled me aside. Her tone changed. It always did when no one else was around. "I don't want you bringing this kind of junk into my home again," she said, quietly but sharply. "You embarrassed me." I stared at her. The same girl whose fever I nursed when her husband forgot to pick up medicine. The girl I watched cry after her miscarriage, held while her own mother-in-law said nothing. The girl whose first rent I secretly paid behind her prideful back. "I'm sorry," I whispered. She folded her arms. "You're always sorry, but sorry doesn't clean the smell off my couch." Then her eyes hardened. "You've overstayed, Mom. This house, it's not yours. I know you think you're helping with the kids, but honestly, you just get in the way. You leave things around. You forget appointments. You talk too much when my friends are here. I'm tired." I felt the words hit like small pebbles. Not enough to wound, but relentless. She stepped closer. "Today was the last day, okay? It's my birthday, and I want this house to feel like mine, not like some old woman's nursing station." I nodded slowly. She didn't stop. "You have until Friday. Take your things. I'll pay for a week in a motel or something, but after that, please don't come back ever." I looked past her shoulder. Her daughter, my granddaughter, was blowing out the candles with her friends. Balloons bounced near the ceiling fan. Someone popped a champagne cork. Laughter floated in. I turned back to Emily. Her arms were still folded. She didn't meet my eyes. I wanted to ask her, "Do you remember when you had nothing? When your baby's father left and I worked nights just to buy formula?" But I didn't. I just smiled again. Not out of pride or peace or forgiveness, but because when you've been betrayed by someone you gave your entire life to, the only thing you can control is how quietly you walk away. I went upstairs, packed what little I had, a few sweaters, my blood pressure pills, an old photograph of my late husband. The velvet pouch was gone. I didn't look for it. On the way out, I passed the living room. Emily was already telling her friends about her crazy mom and how she tried to give me a haunted necklace. I stood there for a second longer, invisible in my own daughter's house. Then I opened the door, stepped into the cold, and left. The last thing I heard was her voice, loud and clear. This was the last birthday I let that leech near me. She's not welcome anymore, ever. She meant it, and I believed her. It was the spring of 1968, and the air still carried the scent of war, even if the bombs had stopped falling years before. I was 24, working at a small cafe on the edge of our town. We served truck drivers mostly, rough men with tired eyes and louder laughs. But one afternoon, a quiet man with polished shoes and a pressed shirt walked in. He didn't order coffee. He asked for directions to the bus station. I gave him the way and a smile. The next day, he came back, and the day after that. His name was Thomas. He said he was a mechanic, said he had no family left. He said he liked how I poured tea, not rushed, not careless. 2 months later, we were married in a courthouse with no guests, no cake, just a man with a pen and a stamp. We rented a small room above a barber shop where the smell of shaving cream seeped into our sheets. He brought me home flowers wrapped in newspaper. I cooked him stews from chicken bones and potato peels. We had nothing, but I believed in us, in that kind of stubborn, foolish love only the young and bruised believe in. Then came the war. He didn't want to go, but he did. And for 2 years, I didn't know if he was dead or just missing. When he came back, his eyes were different. So were his hands, quieter, colder. He didn't talk about what he saw, and I didn't ask. Instead, I pressed my ear against his chest at night, just to hear the rhythm of his return. Money was tight. We shared one coat between us. I made dresses from curtains, darned socks until they were more thread than fabric. He worked 3 jobs. I picked up shifts at the diner again. We saved every coin in a rusted biscuit tin under the floorboard. Then, on our 10th anniversary, he asked me to close my eyes. I heard the snap of a velvet box. When I opened them, there it was, a necklace. Gold chain, emerald center, delicate but not small. The kind of thing women in magazines wore. The kind of thing I never even let myself dream of. "Where did you get this?" I asked, fingers trembling. "I traded the car," he said. "You always said green was your color." We didn't have a car anymore, but I wore that necklace every Sunday after that. Only Sundays, only church. Then carefully back in its pouch. I never let it tarnish. I wiped it with linen. I whispered to it like it was sacred. People said he must love me dearly. I believed them. Then, 3 months later, he left. No note, no suitcase, just an empty closet and a bank account with $5 in it. I filed a report. I waited at the door every evening. Thought maybe he'd had a breakdown, a car accident, a kidnapping. Then I saw him 2 towns over with another woman, holding her hand, laughing the way he used to with me. He saw me and he didn't flinch. I didn't cry in public. I walked away. At home, I opened the velvet box. The necklace lay there untouched. I should have pawned it. I almost did. But I couldn't because for 10 years I had given everything, my youth, my hunger, my silence. And this was the only proof that once I had been chosen, I never wore it again. Not after that day. But I kept it because even when someone leaves, their love, or the illusion of it, doesn't just vanish. It lingers like a perfume in an empty room. And I wasn't ready to clean the air just yet. Years passed. Emily was born. I raised her alone. I never told her about Thomas. Not the real Thomas. She thought he died in the war. It was easier that way. I worked, saved, cooked, taught her how to sew and spell and stand tall. She became everything I wasn't allowed to be, strong, outspoken, modern. I thought when she was ready, I would give her the necklace. Not for the gold, not for the emerald, but for the story, the truth that even the most painful loves leave behind something beautiful if you know how to look. But when I handed her the box, she saw only rust. She didn't know it was the last thing her father ever gave me. She didn't know it was once worth more than our apartment. She didn't even ask. And I didn't tell her because sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is what you give instead of hate. The motel room smelled of bleach and loneliness. The curtains didn't close all the way, and the humming from the vending machine outside my door never stopped. Still, it was quiet, and after 35 years of being everyone's helper, everyone's last call, quiet was a strange relief. 3 days after Emily asked me to leave, I saw the flyer, a glossy invitation tucked between advertisements at the motel front desk. Charity auction and brunch hosted by the local women's league. Emily's name was there in fine print. Co-chair, of course. I almost tossed it, but something pulled at me. Maybe I wanted to see her again. Maybe I thought she might have changed her mind. Maybe I just needed to be in a room where people still dressed like life was worth something. So I went. I wore my best coat, the one with the lining coming undone, and found a quiet corner in the back. Nobody noticed me. Nobody ever did, really. There were tables full of crystal bowls, knitted scarves, framed paintings of lighthouses. Most of it looked like things people gave away when they didn't want to move it. I was just sipping lukewarm coffee when I saw it. Box 47, a velvet box. Familiar? Too familiar? I stood and walked slowly toward the table. My knees ached from motel beds and forgotten birthdays, but I moved like someone half my age. There it was, my necklace. My necklace. The gold chain still shone under the lights, though the emerald seemed dimmer, like it knew it didn't belong there. The tag taped to the side said, "Vintage costume necklace. Starting bid, $10. Costume." The word hit harder than Emily's laughter. I picked it up with both hands and ran my fingers across the clasp. Yes, the tiny scratch near the hook, the faint initials etched on the back. T.W., Thomas Williams. He had it engraved once before he left. I looked around. Emily wasn't at the table. She was across the room, laughing with the mayor's wife, wearing pearls that I knew she didn't buy herself. Her voice rose above the crowd, confident, effortless, so sure of her place. I stood there holding the box. Then the auctioneer rang the bell. "Box 47, he announced. "Lovely vintage necklace, perfect for holiday parties or a costume ball." I didn't speak, didn't scream, didn't run. I sat back down and watched. 10, someone called. 12, 15. Then silence. Any other takers? A woman near the front in a lavender blazer and overdyed hair raised her hand. $40. Sold. I watched the necklace disappear into a plastic bag, handed off like a clearance item at a garage sale. The woman looked pleased with herself. A bargain, no doubt. Emily never glanced my way. She didn't recognize me. Or maybe she did. Maybe she just didn't care. I left before the brunch. Outside, the sun was too bright. The sidewalk burned through the soles of my shoes. I walked 2 blocks before I let myself cry. Not loud, not messy, just the kind of crying that slips out in pieces, like old pipes leaking drop by drop. I found a bench, sat down, and let the tears run. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about memory. That necklace was my past. The only piece of love I had left from a man who, for all his sins, once looked at me like I was the only thing on earth worth saving. Emily didn't know, didn't ask, didn't care. I thought about running after the woman in the lavender blazer, offering her double, triple, but then what? Take it back and hide it in a drawer again like a secret shame? Some things once sold are meant to stay gone. Instead, I walked back to the motel, sat on the edge of the bed, took out my handbag, and found the envelope I kept in the lining. The appraisal paper, dated 1985, signed by a jeweler on Lexington Avenue in Manhattan. Estimated value, $500,000, $500,000. I folded it neatly and placed it on the nightstand. Then I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "She sold me for $40, and I wasn't talking about the necklace anymore." The night after the auction, I didn't sleep. Not from sorrow. That had passed. Not from anger. I'd swallowed too much of that over the years. It was something colder now, heavier. The kind of stillness that comes when something inside you quietly shuts off. I waited for the sunrise like a prisoner waiting for sentence. When the first light broke through the blinds, I got dressed. Same coat, same shoes. I walked to the bus stop and caught the early route back to my old neighborhood. Not to Emily's, of course. She made sure I knew I was no longer welcome. I was headed somewhere older. The house I lived in after Thomas left was still standing. It was small, and half the roof now sagged like tired shoulders. I'd rented it out years ago, but the back unit, the one we called the laundry room, I kept for storage. There was a dusty key under the flower pot. No one had touched it in years. Inside, the air was thick with cobwebs and silence. I moved to the corner, knelt down beside the old oak dresser, and pulled away the loose floorboard. There it was, the fireproof tin box wrapped in a faded red scarf. My hands didn't tremble, not anymore. Inside the box were a few birth certificates, a letter Thomas had written from overseas, unopened, and an envelope yellowed with age marked in thick black pen. Appraisal. I opened it, and there it was. Lexington Avenue, New York, 1985. Appraised by Goldberg and Stein Jewelers. Item, 1 custom gold necklace with emerald centerpiece. Estimated retail value, $500,000. I read it twice, then a third time. $500,000, For decades, that piece of paper had meant little. I never planned to sell the necklace. It wasn't about the money. It was about what it stood for, a man's final act of tenderness before he vanished. A decade of love pressed into golden stone. I remembered the day I brought it to the jeweler. I was in the city for a cousin's funeral. On impulse, I stepped into the store, the necklace wrapped in tissue inside my handbag. I wanted to know if it was real. When the man behind the counter examined it, his eyes widened. "Ma'am," he said, "this is museum quality. The emerald alone is a collector's piece. Have you considered insuring it?" I laughed. "We barely insure the car." He offered to buy it right there. I said, "No." He pushed again with a number I barely understood at the time. But I left with the necklace and the paper. I tucked it away in a place no one could steal. Not from me, not from my memory. Now the necklace was gone, and memory had become a liability. I sat on the concrete floor and stared at the paper. Emily never asked about it. Never once asked where the necklace came from, what it meant. She saw something old and dull, something that smelled like the past, and not the kind of past she wanted. But I knew what it had cost. Not just in money, but in dignity, in decades of waiting, in the way I forgave a man who didn't deserve it, just so I could raise a child without hate in her bones. And now she had traded it for brunch chatter and a $40 bid from a woman in a lavender blazer. She didn't lose a necklace. She lost the story. She lost her mother's last attempt at connection. I folded the paper again, tighter this time, sharper. A new kind of resolve settled in me. Not rage, not vengeance, but clarity. It was never about the jewelry. It was about recognition, about whether my life, my sacrifices, my silence, my love meant anything to the one person I gave everything to. And now I had my answer. She didn't want the story, so I would rewrite the ending. There was a time I swore I would never become my mother. Not because she was cruel. She wasn't. Not because she failed us. She didn't. But because in the end, she died quietly, forgotten by the very children she gave everything to. And I thought, not me, never me. My mother Ruth was a plain woman. She had thick ankles, a soft voice, and hands like cracked porcelain from decades of scrubbing and sewing and lifting children who didn't thank her. She raised 5 of us in a 2-room house with no indoor plumbing. She made soup from bones, dressed us from second-hand piles, and kissed our foreheads like each of us was the last child on earth. We didn't see her. Not really. I remember the first time I saw her cry. I was 12. My brother Paul had just stormed out, saying she was too controlling and that her rules were from the Stone Age. She sat at the table after he left, her hands folded tightly, and said nothing. Then a tear rolled down her cheek, just one. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. When we grew up, we left her, not all at once, but steadily, like sand falling through fingers. First my sister, who married a man in another state and called less and less. Then my brothers, who only came by when they needed money or food or someone to watch the kids. I visited. I did, but not often enough. By the time she was in her 70s, she was living alone, heating soup from cans, waiting for a phone to ring that barely did. I remember coming by once with Emily, who was still little. My mother reached for her, smiling with that familiar tenderness, and Emily clung to me, hiding her face. She didn't know this wrinkled woman with the thinning hair and stooped back. She didn't want to know. My mother pretended not to notice. That night, after Emily fell asleep in the car, my mother said, "You'll understand one day when you give everything and then become invisible." I didn't want to understand. I didn't want to imagine that future. But here I was, years later, staring at her reflection. Not in a mirror, but in my own life, alone, discarded, not out of cruelty, but out of casual dismissal, the same way we dismiss wallpaper. Always there, quietly fading. I remembered cleaning out her house after she died. She had a small box under her bed filled with cards we'd sent her. Birthday cards, Mother's Day cards, notes from when we were children. Each one was wrapped in tissue like treasure. I threw most of them out. I was tired, grieving in a rush. Now I would give anything to hold those cards again. To see what she saw in our scribbled ink and stickers and generic poems. To feel what she must have felt alone in her bed, holding paper memories like they were warmth. I had promised myself, standing at her graveside, that I would never let my life end that way. That I would never become a woman who gave everything and was left with nothing. And yet Emily's voice echoed in my head. "You've overstayed, Mom. You just get in the way. You're not welcome anymore, ever. I had become exactly what I feared. But unlike my mother, I had something she didn't: time and choice. I could sit in the motel room, let my story end like hers did, gently, painfully, with no one watching. Or I could do what no one expected me to do. Stop being generous to those who only take. Stop being the woman whose name is only remembered on bills and hospital forms. I looked at the envelope again, the appraisal, the legacy, the proof that I once mattered to someone, even if that someone failed me. And I thought of my mother. I whispered, "You were worth more than they knew." Then I stood up. It was time to do what she never did, not out of revenge, but out of dignity. I've always believed that when someone shows you who they are, you should believe them the first time. But with Emily, I kept making excuses. I kept telling myself she was tired, overworked, stressed. That one day, she'd look at me and remember who taught her how to walk, who stayed up all night when she had croup, who sewed her prom dress by hand when we couldn't afford the boutique. But excuses don't rewrite truths. And the truth was simple: she didn't want me. Not in her house, not in her life, not in her future. So I decided I would stop giving her my past. 2 days after finding the appraisal document, I took the envelope and walked to the corner of Pine and Jefferson to the beige brick building with frosted glass windows and brass letters that read Langston and Pierce, Estate Planning and Elder Law. The receptionist was a soft-spoken girl named Marcy. She looked up, startled to see someone my age walk in without a walker or an appointment. "I'd like to revise my will," I said, placing the envelope gently on the counter. Immediately she blinked. "Of course, one moment." She led me to a small room with warm lighting and a faint smell of pine. There were tissues on the table, which I appreciated, not because I planned to cry, but because I didn't trust myself not to. Mr. Langston was younger than I expected, mid-40s, with graying temples and kind eyes. He greeted me with a handshake that wasn't condescending. That alone earned him points. "I've reviewed your previous documents," he said after we exchanged pleasantries. "Your daughter Emily is currently listed as sole beneficiary. Is that correct?" It was. I said it won't be anymore. He didn't ask why. "Good man. I want to remove her name entirely. All assets, the home, savings, the remaining pension fund, I want transferred to someone else." "And who would that be?" he asked gently. I reached into my bag and pulled out a photograph. A woman in her 30s, dark hair pulled into a bun, smiling as she held a tray of tea beside my reading chair. "Her name is Maria. She's been my caregiver for 5 years. She was there when I fell and couldn't get up, when I had pneumonia and no one came to visit, when I cried at night thinking I'd failed as a mother. She never asked for more money. She never judged my silence. She just stayed." Mr. Langston nodded, scribbling notes. "Does Maria know about this?" "No," I said. "And I don't plan on telling her until I'm gone." I took a breath. "I want her to have the house, the insurance, the jewelry that's left. And I want her to know that someone saw her, that someone valued her presence." We spent the next 2 hours going over documents. He walked me through every clause, every scenario. What would happen if Maria passed before me? What would happen if Emily contested the will? "She will," I said calmly. "She'll be furious. Do you want to write a statement? Something to explain your reasoning?" I thought for a moment. Then I nodded. He handed me a pen and I wrote, "To whom it may concern, this decision was not made in haste, nor out of malice. It is the result of years of silence, neglect, and a final act that showed me the truth. Love is not measured in blood. It is measured in presence, in respect, in the way you hold someone's past without mocking it. My daughter Emily is not a bad person, but she no longer sees me as a person, only a burden. Maria saw me. Therefore, I leave her everything because she gave me something no one else did: dignity in my final years. May this not be seen as revenge, but as recognition." Ruth Ann Williams. When I handed the letter to Mr. Langston, he read it without a word, then placed it in a folder and locked it in a drawer. "It's done," he said. "We'll notarize and file everything this week unless you change your mind." "I won't," I said. Outside, the sun was bright but not warm. The wind cut through my coat like needles, but I didn't shiver. I felt whole, not happy, not vindicated, just settled. That night, back at the motel, I made Maria a cup of tea, the way she always made it for me, with a slice of lemon and a bit of honey. She didn't know what I had done. She didn't need to. She just smiled, took the cup, and sat beside me on the cakey old couch. "You look different today," she said. "I am," I whispered. "I finally did something for myself." She patted my hand, not pressing, not asking. And I knew I had made the right choice. Sometimes family isn't who shares your blood. It's who sits beside you when the world turns its back. I hadn't seen Emily in weeks. She didn't call, didn't text, and I didn't reach out either. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I had finally accepted something most mothers never want. Sometimes the child you raise is not the person you hoped they'd become. But closure isn't a gift you wait for. It's one you give yourself, so I called her. She answered on the second ring. "Hello, it's me," I said, my voice calm. "I'd like to take you to dinner." "Just you and me." A pause. "Why?" "I think we should talk." Another pause. Then finally, "Fine, fine." We met at a small Italian place near the edge of town. The kind with red check tablecloths and flickering candles that smell like cinnamon. I picked it because it was quiet, neutral, no history. Emily arrived in a beige trench coat, hair pulled back tight. She looked beautiful, tired, and guarded. She didn't hug me. She sat down across from me, arms folded, phone face down beside her. "I only have an hour," she said. I nodded. "That's plenty," we ordered. She chose a salad with no dressing. I got the lasagna. For a while, we ate in silence. The clinking of cutlery filled the space between us. Then I placed a sealed envelope on the table. Her eyes narrowed. "What's this?" "Something you should read?" She opened it slowly. Inside was a single copy of my newly revised will. Her name had been removed, replaced. She stared at the document, then back at me. "This is a joke, right?" "No," I said, sipping my water. "It's not. You're leaving everything to Maria?" I didn't answer. She blinked, stunned. "She's your nurse, Mom. She's not family." I looked at her steadily. She treated me like one. She pushed back from the table slightly, her voice rising. "You're punishing me because of a necklace." I shook my head. "No, Emily. I'm recognizing what you showed me that day. Who you really are. Who I've been to you." "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "It was just a mistake. I didn't know." "You didn't ask," I cut in. "You never asked. You never wanted to know." I leaned in, quiet now. "You sold something that represented the last bit of love and memory I had left from a time before you. You mocked it. You laughed in front of everyone. And then you got rid of it like it was trash." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "I'm your mother," I said, my voice trembling now. "But that day you sold me." I paused, then added the words I'd rehearsed in the mirror. "For $40. She stared at me, her hands shaking now. "I didn't mean—" "But you did," I said softly. "You meant every word, every choice. You told me I was unwanted, a burden, and you meant it." She covered her mouth with her hand. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Mom, I didn't know it would hurt you like this." I nodded. "That's the difference between us. I always knew what hurt you. I spent my life protecting you from it." A tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "I know," I said. "So did I." We sat there for a long time. No yelling, no drama, just truth. Eventually she spoke again. "Is it too late to fix this?" I took her hand across the table, held it gently. "I didn't come here for an apology, Emily. I came to let you know that's all." She looked down, silent. The waiter brought the check. I paid. As we stood to leave, I placed one more envelope in her hand. It was a photo, the necklace taken decades ago, worn around my neck on our 10th anniversary. "I hope one day you understand what it meant." She nodded, her lips trembling. I didn't hug her. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out into the night, my coat wrapped tight, and for the first time in years, I didn't look back. The final years of my life were not lavish, but they were mine. I moved into a quiet care home on the edge of town, a small place with ivy on the walls and birds that gathered by the window each morning. I chose it myself. No one forced me. No one freed up a house by getting rid of me. I packed my things and left with grace. Maria visited every week. She brought me fresh flowers, hand lotion, and mystery novels we'd read together in the evenings. Sometimes she brought her little niece, who'd sit on the rug and draw pictures of us. It was simple, peaceful, human. I wasn't waiting to die. I was finally beginning to live unburdened by expectation, free of the hunger for someone's approval. And yet part of me still held on, not out of anger, not out of regret, but out of a mother's hope, the foolish, indestructible thing we carry long after we should have let go. So I wrote a letter, not a will, a farewell. My dearest Emily, if this letter finds you, it means I've gone ahead. Don't cry for me. I lived long enough to understand myself, and few can say that. You are not a villain in my story. You are simply the chapter I wished had read differently. There were moments when I saw your light, when you laughed as a child, when you curled beside me on rainy nights. I held on to those, maybe too tightly. I know you did not mean to hurt me the way you did, but intent is not the same as impact. I hope you find the space to look inward, not for guilt, but for understanding. And if one day you find the necklace again, if you ever search for it and hold it in your hands, keep it. Not for its worth, not for the emerald or the gold. Keep it as a reminder of what you once had and what you chose to let go. Love doesn't vanish, but it does remember. Mama left the letter with Mr. Langston with clear instructions to deliver it upon my passing. But life, as always, had its own sense of timing. One evening, just after sunset, I heard a commotion in the front hallway of the care home. Raised voices, a receptionist trying to calm someone down. Then came the sound of heels, expensive, sharp, clicking toward my room. Emily burst in, eyes red, mascara smudged. In her trembling hands, a small velvet box. I found it, she gasped. I tracked down the woman who bought it at the auction. I paid her $1 million to get it back. She fell to her knees beside me, holding the box out like a peace offering. You can have it again. We can start over. Mom, please. I looked down at the box, then at her. I didn't take it. Instead, I opened it gently and stared inside. It was the wrong necklace, a fake, a replica. The emerald was glass, the weight all wrong, the clasp a cheap imitation. But the worst part, the part that cut deeper than all the rest, was her belief that money could fix what she had broken with disregard. She didn't search for meaning. She searched for value. I closed the box and handed it back to her. This isn't it, I said quietly. But I paid. I know, but what you're holding is just glass, just like your apology. She froze, and I continued, calm and steady. You still don't understand, Emily. It was never about the money. It was about the memory, the gesture, the love behind it. You can't buy back what you threw away. You can't replicate dignity. She began to sob, not like a child, but like a woman who realized too late that she had built her life on a foundation of shallow comforts. I didn't comfort her. I just stood, walked to the window, and watched the birds flutter from one tree to another, wild, free, content. Behind me, Emily whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." I nodded once. Then I said the last words I ever said to her. So am I. She left. I never saw her again. But in that care home, I found a new family. Women with stories like mine, men who remembered things their children never asked about, friends who didn't care what I had, only who I was. We read, we laughed, we mourned and healed. And when my final day came, I held Maria's hand and smiled. Because though dignity can't be taken with you, it must be left behind as proof that you lived with it. And I did.